This is my, I don't know if you can see it, but this is, you know, I do eat what I talk about. Here's a AMR-100. I've got some videos actually I'll show, but it's tweaking away here in the background. So I'm actually going to turn it down and hopefully it won't burn up while we're sitting here. So everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Right. So we're really going to talk about the some of the radio contributions from Australia and even New Zealand during World War II. The most famous of which are the Teleradios. And then there was the AMR-100 and 101 made by Amalgamated Wireless of Australasia. And then there was an AR7 made by Kingsley, also Australia. Then a series of receivers used by the New Zealand Post Office pre-World War II and through World War II. And finally, we're going to talk about a receiver that I've never seen in person before, but it was a real, everybody wanted one after the war because it was late World War manufactured and stable and no longer had plug-in coils and all that kind of thing. You might notice the logo, Worldwide Wireless. So Amalgamated Wireless Australasia was a RCA subsidiary, and you know, they had multiple lines of business: international communication, ship to shore, training of operators, broadcasting, manufacturing, and also island to island communication. And we're going to talk quite a bit about that tonight. So here's some nice slides I found out there, and you can see, you know, their radio broadcast line is radiola, so that's pretty interesting. Here's a nice float showing where they're touting their communications business here. So here they're showing off one of the radios they made for the war effort. This is a wireless set 19 in an interesting tank mock-up. And, you know, as far as island to island communications, Australia actually had a far-flung empire prior to World War II, many islands. New Guinea seems to be one that they talk about quite a bit because of all the gold mining that was happening at the time. But they had over 100 radio sites controlled by AWA with AWA employees and equipment across the Pacific prior to World War II. And they also had a fleet of ships, of course, and they were also using the same type of equipment. Here's a beautiful picture that I came across showing a really nice, my guess is probably slightly post-war, late World War II or post-war World War II, showing quite a bit of AWA equipment. And we need to find one of those big AWA logos that's over on that transmitter on the left. That would be a really nice thing, kind of like the front of a VW, you know, where they used to steal those emblems. AWA, from a marketing point of view, they used the term Teleradio quite a bit, and it worked for them through the 1980s. Even they were still selling Teleradios for ship and that for personal ships and that kind of thing. And this is one of their earliest, called a Teleradio Model 1, and of course it was people powered. And if you look at that gentleman's shorts, he's got an AWA logo on his shorts. So he was an employee. So all these folks that are all scattered out across the Pacific, these various islands, were employees of AWA as well. So this was the next version, Teleradio Type 3A, this is circa 1938. And it was touted as having an output power of 10 watts, 4 units. And this is a feature, total weight of less than 200 pounds and smaller than 3 cubic feet, 13 to 500 meters operation. Here's one, and some of the folks that know Teleradios may start noticing these. This was their World War II era equipment here, and very heavy equipment, multiple pieces. They had their own nomenclature number that's fairly complex, all these C numbers and all that. So a lot of different versions and variations and evolution. The nicest transmitter of the World War II era is they call it the Model 3BZ, and I've also seen it called the AMT-150. Never touched one of these, but very nice. And of course, this, instead of being CW only, the equipment now has audio, so AM or CW. So big advancement there. Now, interesting, we're going to talk about Lend-Lease and reciprocal Lend-Lease, but I didn't know it until I put this presentation together that the Teleradios were also offered back to U.S. and military as part of a reciprocal Lend-Lease agreement. And this is showing that equipment there. So I only know of one person who owns a set of Teleradios, and that's Dale KW1I. You guys might know him. He's a member of Military Radio, Collectors Association, also the old Military Radio Net that happens Saturday mornings. Very beautiful setup here. New Zealand, and I just found this out as well. New Zealand also had 3B style setups, and this is the only picture that I've come across so far, but I'll start looking for more, and they're not sure who manufactured this particular system. So the Australian War Memorial online has wonderful pictures circa World War II. Here's a woman's Australian Air Force corporal operating a set of teleradios during the war, circa 1944. This is probably the most famous picture showing teleradios. This was the head primary listening post, the coordination post during the Guadalcanal campaign of all the coast watchers. It was what they call Station Kin, and you can see they're using teleradios, as were all the coast watchers of the period. And these were, quite complex setups. They said it took 20 men and porters to carry all the stuff they needed from place to place when they moved their radios, their teleradios. And in the background, by the way, there's also one national. It's an RAS, which means it probably came off of a ship, and they moved it ashore. And so that's a really nice. This I happen to have one that was manufactured 2 years. The contract date was December 7th, 1939, and it's waiting to be restored, sitting in my garage right now. But the good thing is it has all the different nomenclature plates. So here's the Australian Coast Watchers on Bougainville, circa 1944, and it's just showing how many people it took to have a valid Coast Watcher setup there. Now, I have a family connection to Bougainville. My wife's uncle unfortunately lost his life during the Battle for Hill 700, which was in March of 1944. He was the head of the scout platoon, and they were trying to get up this mountain. And they did make it to the peak, but they found out that the Japanese were up on top, and most of the squad was killed, but they hung in for a while and communicated and all that kind of thing. So anyway, I'd like to go to Bougainville sometime. And here's a picture of him, by the way. So now, one of the reasons for this presentation is that there's been a recent addition to the AWA Museum. Looks a little scruffy, but it's a made in Australia HRO clone, if you will, an AMR-101. And here's another picture. This is the one I still have here. Now, this radio was licensed by National, and it has some National parts inside. So this is a legitimate clone, if you will, a legal clone. Now, the S meters, by the way, if you'll notice, the S meter on this first picture is a bit different than this just generic milliamp meter. And, that's the same as national HROs throughout the war. They basically used whatever meter they happened to have at the time. And the Germans, for example, you find a lot of German military sets that don't have the meters. They had to ship them without meters because they couldn't get them from the factory or whatever. So at least these have the meters. Now, why did we need to have AMR-101s? Here's a beautiful marked for export national HRO. You'll notice the front of the receiver is marked, stamped M243, as are each of the coils in the front, as opposed to just being stamped on the side of the coils, for example. And I've been told that this receiver was destined to be exported somewhere. And you can see another closer picture of this. But, especially regarding the Pacific, the supply lines were really long, and Australia had some manufacturing excess capacity, whereas the national company did not. So an arrangement was made, a reverse Lend-Lease arrangement was made for them to manufacture these radios for the U.S. Signal Corps and use them in the Pacific campaign. And now these were typically available in the 1944 and 1945 timeframe. So they're sort of late to the party, by the way. So here's President Roosevelt's signing the Lend-Lease bill early on. We basically provided 50 billion or so at the time worth of supplies to various countries to help win the war. Under this arrangement, materials were supplied at no cost, and they were supposed to be used until returned or destroyed, or paid for. And in most cases, the equipment was just destroyed. Lots of aircraft and that sort of thing. So I did not know about the reverse Lend-Lease, though I'd always heard that AMR-101 was the reverse Lend-Lease receiver. And it turns out that Australia Lend-Leased back to the United States a total of 7.8 billion, and which is very interesting. And it certainly helped shorten the supply lines and freeing up valuable space for other war material. And they supplied, of course, food and clothing and infrastructure, facilities and that kind of thing. But they also had a strong electronics, a number of companies in Australia and New Zealand, and so they did their part as well. Here's an interesting picture. The Brits had, I think, around a dozen aircraft carriers at the end of the war, but they got in kind of late. But they used some Spitfires, but the undercarriage were pretty weak, so they ended up with most of our using our aircraft. And here's a picture of the HMS Pioneer actually ditching their 100 or so aircraft into the ocean off the coast of Australia, and the other British aircraft carriers did it as well. So it's amazing, how much stuff got dumped in the ocean. Luckily, some of the AMR-101s did not have that fate. Here's an old picture I found on the internet of Leo Myerson from World Radio Lab, and also his buddy Jim Musgrove, and they're admiring an AMR-101, probably because they didn't know what it was. Unfortunately, when you find an AMR-101, which is the rack mount version, or the AMR-100, which is the tabletop version radio, they're in pretty rough shape at most hamfest, missing the meter, missing the coils. missing the power supply, missing the speaker. The speaker and the power supply are, of course, the rarest pieces. So here's an example of a recent one that I think I got it just for parts. Now they can be beautiful sets. Here's a totally restored AMR-100, which is the desktop version. And the owner at the time said that he thought the AMR-100 outperformed his national HRO 5. So it's a pretty good set. I mean, it's a late World War II set, so it's got some advantages over especially a pre-war HRO. These pictures are very, very rare. Here's the picture of a intercept facility using AMR-100s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. You can see the coils up on the wall for the various sets. I only have 2 pictures like this. The other picture came again from the Australian War Memorial. Here's a facility cranking out some radio news, and they called the newspaper Guinea Gold, which is interesting because, again, the connection to New Guinea and the gold fields there and all that. But anyway, if you look in the far left corner, you can see an AMR-101. And the reason why you know that is it's got wings. It's set up to be a rack mount rig if that's what you want. But of course, the gear, like the power supply sitting on top of the receiver, it also has feet, so you can use it as a standalone tabletop power supply as well. Here's a close-up of that set. Not very good, I apologize. I have a really nice example still that may end up also in the AWA museum. And the only reason why it's so nice is that it came in its 400-pound transit case, which I had shipped from Kansas. Okay, but it says U.S. Signal Corps model AMR-101, and it has a contract number as well. Here's what it looks like inside the case. The power supply is up top. Of course, it's 110, 220, also will run on 12 volts. Then the receiver itself, and then you either have a wooden or a metal or a combination of both coil box there in the bottom as well. And of course, the equipment was screwed into basically a rack inside this case, but you have to take it out of the case because you can't get to the wire connections behind it to set it all up in the transit case. So here's the data tag, U.S. Signal Corps, and the contract number. The serial numbers for the AMR-101s tend to run from about 1750 up. And my estimate, there was probably 200 or 300 made, maybe 250. The coils, they're general coverage coils. They have no band spread because they have the logging chart over on the right. They have a real nice little serial number tags on each coil, which a lot of times are missing because they're just screwed on. And again, the coil box may be wooden or metal or a combination of both. Orphan coils do show up on eBay from time to time, and they seem to work okay in a set, a set with a different serial number. They're not interoperable with any other HRO type radio. One's got this adjustment here sticking out of one of the coil segments. There's actually a big long screwdriver that comes in the transit case to make this adjustment from the rear of the receiver. There's also a smaller box inside the transit case with the all the speakers set in there, cables, hand tools, tube spares. Most of them were Philips, by the way. A couple of them were AWA manufacturer. And of course, came with 2 pair of headphones. And to me, that's always the sign of a true military receiver if it's got 2 headphones connections on the front. The speaker is probably the rarest of the pieces. It's just a 2-wire speaker. The transformer for the radio is in the radio itself, but it's a nice little speaker, but very, very rare. These headphones, here's the 2 sets, very well made. marked SMI ESM in Sydney. Now, a number of the AMR-100s and 101s I've seen, and I've probably seen maybe 6 or 8 in 30 years or so. Most of them are missing their bottom plate for some reason. But they also, basically, they've been tropicalized, some type of a varnish or something on these parts, and the aluminum cabinet they're painted green. Now, one of the weaknesses of these receivers are the case paint is weak, and it gets easily scratched. So more often than not, you're in for a paint job if you're going to try to restore one of these. Now, they are an excellent performer, and here's, I'll show you a few videos of the one I have behind me.
At Full Throttle Power Sports, 100 Indian Walk in Lowell, online at ncfullthrottle.com.
We're lucky we have a couple of AM nets every morning down this way. One's the southeast around Atlanta, and they're on 3725, and they start at 7:30 a.m., but they go on for at least an hour. And we also have another net that starts at 8 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays called the Old Friends Net, and it's right next door. It's on 3715. So, and a lot of times with some receivers, you get a lot of bleed over between these two frequencies and these two AM nets. But not so with this particular radio. And I'm going to show you, at the end of this little video segment, you'll see me switching the knob, moving the knob just slightly and starting to pick up the other more local net.
Okay, and W4OB recognized. I'll put it to you, Ray, in one brief second here. W2CQH in the group, what I was knowing Tom and Reed and Ray, and I put those somewhere else in there as well. Reed, it's always hard to lose people, though, isn't it? Whether we knew them well or didn't, their hands, talk to them in times past, it always hurts and diminishes. And Tom, I fully understand. You had a big day.
I'm on this same frequency before KC. It's a great place to talk about vintage equipment and locate, buy, sell, or trade. So anybody that's desiring a check-in, please call now.
Good morning, Steve, WA4L.
K3OS. WB4ARK, K3OS. All right, buddy. Morning, everybody. From wonderful Hickory. Stay here. I don't know what I did. I was working on the Gonset receiver here. While it seems like I fixed the intermittent, but what has happened is that I've lost audio output and it's distorting a little bit. Fashion, whatever I did.
It's got good presence. Really sounds good. Fills the room with audio. Here's just a little touch of CW. Not just manipulating the various controls. ABC works. This differential works very well. Now, here's a picture of the AMR-100s. Now, the 100s, the tabletop versions are rarer than the 101s, the ones with the 19-inch rack wings. And this one I just passed off recently to my friend, an AWA member, Gary Berg, up in New York, and he does wonderful restoration work. But as you can see, he's going to have to start with a paint job. But again, this particular set's worth it because they're pretty hard to find. Here's a quick look inside. You can see the national tuning unit. over to the right, you can see the crystal filter. And over on the left in the middle, you can see the audio transformer. Now, the meters vary in style. This particular one is the one that the AWA Museum now has. It's a nice meter marked Sydney, a supplier in Sydney. Whereas my unit I have here just has a standard milliamp meter. Now, there's also one of these surfaced, an AMR-100, but instead of being for the U.S. Signal Corps, it was manufactured for the U.S. Navy, and with a different serial number range, a lower range, and also a different contract number. And this is of course, the AMR-100. Also, the meter has the scheme of the meter looks almost homemade. So here's the different contracts. You notice the serial number lower than the 1750 or so typical of the U.S. Army. Here's the S meter I was talking about. I'm also going to talk about a Kingsley. Most people call this the AR7. It was used extensively by the Royal Australia Air Force. If it has a shiny front, chances are it was used by the Army Air Corps of some way, shape, or form. If it's got a green or a black front, it's also known as the Army Reception Set 1. Now, this was an unlicensed copy of the HRO, and National knew it too. And so some over 3,000 of these were manufactured. These were used for long distance, of course, long range communications, fixed circuits, as well as receiving from aircraft. And it was based largely on the HRO model. And there was some litigation. I'll talk about that for just a second. But this set was very popular with radio hams after the war. And unfortunately, because of that, very few survived being unmodified. And the coils are similar, but different. Again, not interoperable with any other HRO-like radio. Here's a picture I just received a few minutes ago. I know of one friend here in near South Carolina that has an AR7, and he mentioned also that he has the wrong power supply, and there's been some modifications and all that type of thing. So typical. Back to the Australian War Memorial. Here's a great picture of a telegraphist operating a AR7, and most of these, they're in a RAS styled vertical cabinet, and Kingsley liked to use these diamond shaped speaker openings. Here's another picture, another gentleman recording signals, and very nice setups they have there. And here's one of their main centers where they're coordinating all the communications across the country, including aircraft. And so they made a lot of these, and they used a lot of these. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We see something like 40 receivers just on this one wall. Here's a picture of some folks setting the various receivers. And of course, here's a broader picture of the rooms. And you'll notice the speakers up above there in the slanted arrangement up top. So as far as the litigation goes, it kind of reminds me, if you read this, it reminds me of when Windows came out, the graphical interface Windows came out, and the Mac was already there. And where the Mac would have a pull-down menu over in the top left, well, Microsoft moved it down to the bottom right. And so there was enough differences that could be spelled out by the lawyers that basically prevented National from winning this the litigation. And there's a lot of good reading out there, but this was a very, very favorite this is a much more popular receiver in Australia as a boat anchor than the AMR-100s and 101, because I think they're just, there was more of them, thousands of them made. Now, there's also some really strange HRO variants that were used by the New Zealand Post Office. Very, very rare. The only example I've ever seen is by that was offered me a while back from George Rancourt, K1ANX. If you know George, he's the purveyor of very unusual radios, and he's an HRO fan as well. So he has some good stuff. You'll notice this coil, it looks longer than all the other coils of all the other HRO type radios that we've seen. I did not buy this radio from him because it just looked like too much of a project. And I'm more of a researcher than a restorer. So I let this one go by, but I collect pictures, and pictures don't weigh anything and don't take up any space. So that's what I'm enjoying. But you do notice that this receiver also has the national PW dial and the national condenser tuning unit gearbox. These pictures are very, very rare. I'm going to show you a little 10-minute video that I think is just outstanding, and I just like British accents, and so let's hopefully the sound comes through okay on this, and it's out there on the web. That's real CW, by the way.
Outside the principal post and telegraph offices throughout the Dominion, and featured also in the daily newspapers, will be found a list of ships at sea which are in radio communication with the coast stations operated by the New Zealand Post and Telegraph Department. Behind this prosaic announcement of ships within wireless range lies the romantic story of modern wireless telegraphy. In the early days of radio, effective communication was limited to 200 miles during the day and about double this distance at night. The rapid advance in radio engineering and the increased use of shortwave transmission has, however, greatly enlarged the range of contact. Until today, there is practically no limit to the distance over which a message can be transmitted. Ships all over the seven seas are in daily contact with the New Zealand radio stations. From the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and the Pacific, messages come. From the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, the China Seas, romantic place names that spell adventure. Radio has brought to the backcountry a swift and reliable contact with the other side of the world. Roughly carved roads that wind down through the ferns and gullies of New Zealand were once the only means of access to the fertile plains, where snug little homesteads nestle under the guardianship of distant hills. Here, in the depths of the country, 23 miles from the nearest telegraph office, we can follow the progress of a simple radio message from the time it is first conceived in the mind of the sender. 40 years ago, this was only a two-room shack on land that was rough and hungry. Farming it is easy work now, or it would be if young Jack hadn't gone off to England. Still, don't you worry, Dad. The lad will come back. Let's see, what's the date? Jack should be in England pretty soon. Sakes alive, it's the boy's birthday today. Jack's never out of his mother's thoughts for very long. Dad seems to be having a bright idea. Why shouldn't they send the young scamp birthday greetings by radio? Yes, Mother, that's what it says. Ships within wireless range. Say, Dad, that son of yours has expensive tastes. Queen Mary, indeed. What next? Yes, Dad, it's only too true. Time marches on. But there are compensations. For nowadays, we can send a radio message from here across the world. It's quite simple. So let's follow Dad's message and see what happens to it. Here's the other end of that telephone conversation, the local post office. Pardon me, I should have said the nearest post office. The local operator accepts the message by telephone and records it on the usual telegraph form. Pardon the gentleman's surprise, but this is only a country office and he doesn't get a radio for the Queen Mary every day. After writing out the message, he checks it back with the sender to make sure it has been correctly received. At the earliest opportunity, the greeting that is shortly to be flashed to the other side of the world is transmitted by Morse to the nearest provincial center. In case you should think otherwise, this is normal transmission and not nervous excitement. The operator at the provincial office receives the message on a Morse sounder. It now goes to another operator for retransmission to the main telegraph center. In this office, our message is transmitted by the teleprinter, an ingenious device whereby high-speed transmission is possible in both directions at once. The message is typed on a standard keyboard which punches holes on a narrow tape instead of printing letters. This perforated tape passes through a transmitter, sends electrical impulses to the receiving station. In the main telegraph room at the GPO Wellington, thousands of messages are transmitted and received daily. With incoming messages, the electrical impulses are automatically converted into Roman characters onto a narrow strip of gummed paper. Here is our message as it is received at Wellington. All the operator has to do is gum the message on a standard form as it comes from the machine, and it is ready for transmission to one of the coast stations. The New Zealand Post and Telegraph Department operates 3 such stations for the transmission of radio messages. Radio ZLW Wellington is situated high up on Tinakori Hill, a point that commands a fine panorama of the city, spreading itself over the surrounding hills. Inside the operator's room at ZLW, men are continually on watch, sending and receiving messages from ships and shore stations all over the globe. Their work is arduous, exacting, and exciting, and accuracy is essential. From here are sent out weather reports, shipping news, and other topical information. Radio-telephone communication is established with lonely islands in mid-ocean. Possibly their only contact with the outside world is a friendly voice that emanates from this room. Here, indeed, is one of the nerve centers of New Zealand. This particular watch is conducted on the 600-meter medium-frequency waveband and is a constant insurance for the safety of life at sea. For 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, this radio set is constantly in use, searching for contact with ships of the 7 seas. On this wavelength, all stations cease ordinary transmission for 3 minutes in every half hour to allow distress calls to receive priority, and the clock is marked as a reminder. Alongside the 600-meter operator is the aviation panel, where men are in constant touch with airports and all aeroplanes equipped with radio. As commercial planes working to a fixed schedule pass overhead, the operator speaks to the pilot by means of radio telephone, giving weather reports and other vital news. Other airports are contacted and valuable information is collected and passed on to airport officials throughout New Zealand. Still another operator at Radio ZLW is the shortwave operator for distant reception and transmission, and it is from here that our radio message sets out on the last stage of its journey. It arrives by telegraph from the GPO and is immediately handed to this operator. His contacts are many and varied, and from time to time he finds it necessary to change his tuning coils in order to obtain a different set of wavelengths. The set he operates is a specially sensitive shortwave receiver, which provides maximum efficiency for contact with ships in all parts of the world. Every vessel has international radio call letters assigned to it, and at a prearranged time, the operator commences to call the required vessel. The telegraph key controls a powerful transmitter situated in another building some little distance away in order to prevent interference with reception. In this room are a number of different types of transmitters, each supplying the energy for the various radio services controlled by the operators in the other building. In addition to those constantly in use, there are spare transmitters that can be brought into service at a moment's notice. The actual amount of electrical energy which is used up in sending our message is equivalent to that used in the average domestic electric radiator. From the transmitter, the energy is delivered to the shortwave aerial by means of a power line. Silent and inactive, the transmitting aerial gives no indication of the multitude of purposes which it fulfills night and day. But on the other side of the world, in the lonely waters of the Atlantic, a ship is constantly on the alert, ready to convert the silence into a sound for human ears through the magic of modern radio. In the wireless cabin of the Queen Mary, a ship's operator picks up his call sign out of a 12,000-mile void. A few adjustments, a brief acknowledgement on his transmitting key, and contact is established. As the radio spells out its message from the back blocks of New Zealand, the operator, with an ease born of long practice, transposes it on his typewriter. After acknowledging the message and signing off, he places it in the regulation envelope. A bellboy takes the message and pages the recipient. Only a few moments ago, this message was being written out in Wellington, and yet here it is on the other side of the world, ready for delivery. The modern marvel that is radio telegraphy has made this miracle possible, and to the comfort of an up-to-date luxury liner, it brings recollections of other times, other places, and other people, telescoping days into minutes and bridging the gulf that separates the countries and peoples of the world. Wherever an aerial mast rears its lonely head to the sky, there stands the outward symbol of the 20th century magic of the radio telegraph service, a monument to man's endeavor and achievement in annihilating space.
What a wonderful video. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm also going to talk about what arguably is the last receiver made down under during World War II by a company called STC, different company, about as big as AWA. This was a communications built and designed in 1945. I have never seen one of these in person either. There was a whole range of these receivers. The K model was actually designed for U.S. services. We were looking for an HF communications receiver to use as part of a direction finding setup. And this receiver version improved on the previous models in terms of stability and shielding, so that it would work well with their direction finding system. So this, as you can imagine, this receiver was in high demand after the war by hams and shortwave listeners. And another benefit of this particular receiver was it no longer used plug-in coil boxes. So it had bands switching built in, which, as this article says, made them easier to use and somewhat tidier. So, and here's a vibrator power supply. Again, I've never seen one of these. So one of my motivations for, of course, this was my interest in coast watching, and some great books out there on the subject. Just as an aside, later in the war, the coast watchers started using what was called a field set 6, coast watching as well. Here's a couple of pictures again from the Australian War Memorial showing field set 6s in operation. You know, as far as throwing surplus equipment in the sea, I was thinking back, I was in Vietnam in the Army at the end of the war in a helicopter unit. And once we stood down, one of my jobs was to help fill up 2 small connexes full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of any kind of weapon you can imagine from 50 calibers down, including enemy weapons, and also radios and desks and that type of thing. And we put them in 2 connexes, 2 small connexes, and chained them up. And I figured we were going to send them down to Da Nang and give them to the South Vietnamese. Well, we were right near the South China Sea. So here comes a Chinook, picks up the first one, takes it out right at the horizon, about 8 miles out, and drops it, big splash, and came back and did the same thing with the other one. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Another interesting thing was my parents, after they retired, their thing was to travel and take cruises. I think they took something like 27 cruises. And these are the binders. My mother kept every matchbox, every daily notice, every ticket, and lots of photographs. And these are sitting in my office waiting to be scanned in so I can distribute them to the family. And I've given away a few of the binders, so there's actually more than these that I'll have to get back. But as you can see, my mother was happiest. I've never seen my mother so happy until I went back and looked at some of these pictures. And she kept everything. And so talking about sending a message to the Queen Mary, I had an experience. It was their anniversary. It was in the late 70s or early 80s. And I decided I would call them while they were down on the Queen Elizabeth I think it was the QE2, I think, in the South Atlantic, and wish them happy anniversary. So, of course, I called on the telephone and talked to I think it was an RCA ship-to-shore operator who connected me to the ship. And, of course, then they had to find my parents, which took about 20 minutes. And when my mother finally came to the phone, she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing. I just wanted to say happy anniversary." And she was, her favorite saying was, "I'm so mad I could spit." And that's basically what she told me. She was not happy that I called and pulled her away from whatever she was doing on the ship. And the sad thing is, it cost me something around $220. That was like a monthly rent back then on my apartment. So $10 a minute. So I have to wonder what the New Zealand Post Office charged to send that message to the Queen Mary. So special thanks to all these different folks and websites. And thanks for watching. And also thanks for supporting the AWA.